Am I the a-hole for not defending my husband and making him cry after he said he will leave me for another woman? I, 28F, am currently sitting in my guest bedroom, staring at the ceiling and wondering how my 3-year marriage turned into a surreal, low-budget psychological thriller in the span of a single dinner. My husband, 33M, is currently in the kitchen making apology pancakes, but the smell of maple syrup is honestly making me nauseous. I feel like I'm mourning a version of a man who never actually existed. To give you the necessary background, my husband has an identical twin brother. When I say identical, I mean it's eerie. They are carbon copies, same height, same build, same sharp jawline, same way of walking that makes people turn their heads. The only way you can tell them apart from across a room is their vibe. My husband has always been the serious one. He's a high-level corporate analyst, very career-oriented, reserved, and honestly, a bit stiff. His brother is the polar opposite. Adventurous, loud, a bit of a thrill-seeker, and perpetually single because he hates being tied down. We've been married for 3 years. We don't have kids yet, and we both work full-time. He makes significantly more money than I do, which never used to be an issue, until about 6 months ago. It started small. I'd forget to pick up his dry cleaning, or I'd be too tired to cook a 3-course meal after my own 10-hour shift, and he'd smirk and say, "You know, I could always just find a second wife who actually enjoys taking care of her husband." The first time he said it, I laughed, thinking it was just a weird, clumsy attempt at humor. But then it became a daily occurrence. Every time I asserted a boundary or asked him to help with the mental load of running a household, the threat came out. "I'm the man of the house. You should really be working harder for my attention. Careful, or I'll be looking for a replacement soon." I told him repeatedly, in calm moments, in heated moments, and in tears, that I hated these comments. I told him they made me feel insecure and unvalued. His response? The classic gaslighter's anthem. "I'm just joking. You're so sensitive. I'm just trying to motivate you to be a better wife." Recently, the jokes took a dark, misogynistic turn. He started talking about how God brought women into the world to serve men's happiness, and that I should thank my lucky stars that a man with his salary and looks chose me. When I lashed out at that, he just rolled his eyes and told me I was overreacting to a prank. Last week, we had a family dinner with his parents, his twin brother, and his younger sister. The atmosphere was already tense because I had been giving my husband the cold shoulder for 2 days over his latest replacement wife comment. We were halfway through the main course when the topic of a family friend's recent divorce came up. My husband, feeling bold with an audience, leaned back in his chair and looked at me. "Honestly," he said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "I think friend had the right idea. After 3 years, you really have to wonder if the product is still worth the investment." I told my wife she's lucky I still find her attractive, otherwise I would have traded her in for a 22-year-old by now. The silence that followed was deafening. I felt the blood drain from my face. I was shaking so hard my fork rattled against the porcelain plate. I looked at his mother, who looked absolutely horrified. His father put down his wine glass, very slowly. Then, the twin brother broke the silence. But it wasn't a defense of my husband. The brother started laughing, that loud, boisterous laugh that usually grates on my nerves. He looked my husband dead in the eye and said, "You are absolutely delusional. Do you actually think anyone else would want you? You're an insecure excuse for a husband. Look at her, then look at you. You're lucky she hasn't realized she's a decade out of your league." My husband turned bright red. "Stay out of this. It's a joke between us." "Oh, is it?" the brother replied, leaning forward. "Well, here's my joke then. Don't worry about her, bro. After you divorce her or trade her in, she's free to have me instead. Same face, same body, but she finally gets to be with the better twin. The one who actually knows how to treat a woman." My husband lost his mind. He jumped up and started screaming at his brother, calling him disrespectful and a snake. The brother just kept laughing, throwing my husband's own words back at him. "Whoa, calm down. I'm just joking. Why are you being so sensitive? I'm just trying to make you work for her attention." The dinner devolved into absolute chaos. Their mother started screaming at my husband about his disgusting, backwards views and demanded he apologize to me immediately. Their father joined in, telling my husband he was ashamed of how he was treating his wife. Then they turned on the brother for being inappropriate and opportunistic. I couldn't breathe. I looked at my sister-in-law, and without a word, we both stood up and walked out. We left the men screaming at each other in the dining room. We went to get bubble tea and walked along the beach for over an hour. I didn't cry. I was just numb. I realized that the career-oriented, reserved man I married was actually just a deeply insecure person who used tradition as a weapon to feel powerful. When we finally went back to the house, everyone was in the living room. My husband looked like he had been put through a meat grinder. His parents had clearly spent the hour laying into him. He gave a mumbled, forced apology to me and his brother. His mom packed us some leftovers because we hadn't actually finished eating and whispered to me, "If he ever says that to you again, you call me." I didn't raise him to be a pig. The car ride home was silent and suffocating. The moment we walked through our front door, the reserved mask fell off. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask how I felt. He turned to me, his face twisted in anger, and asked, "Why didn't you defend me? My brother basically hit on you in front of my parents, and you just sat there. You let him disrespect me." I felt a switch flip inside me. "Defend you?" I shouted. "Defend the man who just told his entire family that he stays with me out of charity? Defend the man who threatens to replace me every time I don't obey him? Why would I defend a bully?" I went off. I told him exactly how much his jokes had eroded my love for him. I asked him if he would be okay if I told everyone he was a temporary placeholder until I found a younger, richer man. And then, something happened that I never expected. My husband, the man who prides himself on being stoic and the man of the house, collapsed onto the sofa and started sobbing. Not just a few tears, full-blown, chest-heaving, snot running down his face, crying. I was shocked. I just stood there watching him. "Do you have feelings for him?" he choked out. I was bewildered. "For your brother? What are you talking about?" "You didn't look disgusted when he said he wanted you," he sobbed. "We have the same face. We have the same body. If you love me, that means you're capable of being in love with him. You're going to leave me for the better version of me, aren't you?" I looked at him. This 33-year-old man crying because he realized his jokes had created a monster he couldn't control. I realized that his entire alpha male/obey me persona was a desperate cover for the fact that he has spent his entire life terrified that he is the lesser twin. He was trying to break me down so that I would be too insecure to ever realize I could do better. I didn't comfort him. I didn't tell him it was okay. I just said, "I am so incredibly disappointed in the man you've turned out to be," and I went to the guest room. He came to the door at 3 a.m., whispering apologies, telling me I'm his entire world, and that he only said those things because he was scared of losing his edge. This morning, he was up at 6 a.m. making a massive breakfast spread, acting like a devoted 1950s housewife. It feels performative. It feels fake. I'm torn. Part of me thinks this was the wake-up call he needed and that maybe marriage counseling could save us. But another part of me, the part that sat on that beach last night, thinks that a man who is to tear his wife down to feel like a man isn't a man worth keeping. He didn't cry because he hurt me. He cried because he realized his brother won the interaction and that I might actually leave. So, am I the a-hole for not defending him against his brother? And am I the asshole for making him cry by telling him I'm ashamed of him? I'm currently looking at divorce lawyers in one tab and marriage counselors in the other. I honestly don't know which one to click. Update. After we got home from that dinner, I couldn't even look at him properly. The energy in the house felt off, like everything familiar had shifted slightly out of place. I told him to sleep on the sofa because I needed space, and for once I didn't soften that statement. He tried to follow me into the bedroom, but I locked the door. He knocked a few times during the night, asking me to talk, but I didn't open it. The next morning, I decided I needed answers instead of just sitting in anger. When we finally sat down, the conversation wasn't calm. It wasn't structured. It was messy, with both of us talking over each other at points, but I made it clear that I wasn't moving forward without understanding where all of this behavior was coming from. That's when he finally gave me an explanation that actually made some sense, even if it didn't excuse anything. He told me that one of his friends had been making comments about our marriage. According to this friend, my husband wasn't acting like the man because I make decisions, I speak my mind, and I don't revolve my life around him. This friend framed it like my husband was being controlled, like he had somehow lost authority in his own home. Instead of brushing that off, he took it seriously. He started consuming a lot of content pushing the same ideas. When I checked his phone, it lined up with what he was saying. His social media was filled with clips and advice about dominance, control, and what a man should be in a relationship. It wasn't subtle either. It was constant, like he had been feeding himself that perspective over and over again. He admitted that he thought making those comments would push me to focus more on him, to try harder, to earn his attention. Hearing that laid out like that didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made things clearer in a way that was hard to ignore. This wasn't just careless joking. It was intentional behavior based on a mindset he had chosen to adopt. When I told him that the version of him I fell in love with was the calm, respectful person he used to be, he broke down again. Not in the same way as before, but enough to show that he understood he had crossed a line. He kept apologizing, promising to cut off that friend, promising to change, promising that it wouldn't happen again. At that point, I wasn't interested in promises. I needed distance. I told him he needed therapy, not just apologies, because this didn't come out of nowhere. Something in him allowed those ideas to take root, and that needed to be addressed properly. Asked him to leave for a while. He didn't want to go, but he eventually did. He's been staying at his parents' house since then. From what I've heard, his mother has not been easy on him. She's been calling him out on everything, not just the dinner incident, but the pattern leading up to it. Since he left, the silence in the house has been noticeable, but not in a bad way. It's more like a reset. I've had space to think without constant interruptions, without someone trying to fix things instantly. He's been calling and sending voice messages, but I haven't responded yet. I've listened to a couple of them, and they all sound the same: apologies, regret, promises to change. I don't doubt that he feels bad right now. The issue is whether that feeling will last once things go back to normal, or if this is just a reaction to the consequences he's facing. What complicates everything is that this isn't who he's been for most of our relationship. That's what makes it harder to walk away immediately. If this had been consistent behavior from the beginning, the decision would feel more straightforward. Instead, it feels like something shifted in him recently, and I'm trying to figure out if that shift is reversible or if it's showing me something that was always there under the surface. At the same time, I'm not ignoring how far things went. The comments weren't small. They weren't harmless. They were repeated, intentional, and they crossed into disrespect in front of other people. That's not something that disappears just because someone apologizes after being called out. Right now, I'm focusing on keeping my distance and not rushing into a decision just because things feel intense. I'm not ready to file for divorce, but I'm also not ready to pretend everything is fine. Counseling is on the table, but only if he actually follows through with real effort, not just words. Update 2. Hi, everyone. It's been a while, and I honestly didn't expect to come back to this, but a lot has happened since everything went down, and I feel like I owe a proper update. I stepped away from all of this for a bit because things were messy in a way that couldn't be fixed overnight. I needed space to actually process everything instead of reacting to it, and therapy ended up becoming a big part of that. Life moved forward, things settled in some areas and got complicated in others, but I'm in a much clearer place now than I was when I first posted. Before getting into what changed, I want to clear something up because it kept coming up in messages and comments. I don't have feelings for my husband's twin. That situation got twisted into something it never was. I knew him before I even met my husband. We met at university and became friends pretty quickly. It was always easy being around him because he's outgoing, always looking for something to do, and he pulls people into whatever chaos he has planned that day. We used to go hiking, check out random events around the city, and just spend time as friends. Through him, I met my husband. Even though they look exactly the same, the difference in personality was obvious from the beginning. My husband was quiet, structured, focused on his work, and steady in a way that felt grounding. That's what drew me to him. Being around him felt calm, and that mattered to me. His brother being in our lives never caused issues before all of this. He was around often, dropping by, hanging out, sometimes staying over if it got late. It was normal. There wasn't any tension tied to that dynamic until the dinner incident blew everything up. After some time, I didn't stay in the house. I left and went back to my parents' place because I didn't want to sit in the same space where everything had shifted so suddenly. I needed distance, not just physically but mentally. My parents reacted in completely different ways. My mom was angry, not in a quiet way either. She took it personally, like it reflected badly on her for trusting him. My dad didn't raise his voice, but the disappointment was obvious. He didn't expect that kind of behavior from someone he respected, and it stuck with him enough that he actually called my husband himself to confirm what had happened. From that point on, my husband started showing up at my parents' house almost every day. It wasn't dramatic or confrontational. He would come by with something small, usually flowers or bubble tea, knowing that's something I like. I refused to see him every time. He never forced it. He would stay for a bit, talk to my parents, and leave. My dad didn't go easy on him. Every visit turned into a conversation where my husband had to answer for what he said and how he acted. It wasn't shouting, but it wasn't comfortable either. My mom, on the other hand, softened faster. She kept telling me to at least hear him out, even once, but I wasn't ready for that. He didn't stop trying, though. Along with showing up, he started writing letters. Not texts, not voice notes, actual letters. I didn't respond to them, but I read every single one. At first, I expected them to sound like apologies without depth, but they didn't come across that way. He acknowledged what he said without downplaying it. He didn't call it a joke anymore or try to explain it away. He wrote about the pressure he felt, where it came from, and how it changed the way he started seeing our relationship. He didn't blame anyone else for it, even when he mentioned his friend's influence. He owned it. He also wrote about therapy. Not just that he was going, but what he was working through. He included details about how often he was going and what he was focusing on, like understanding why he felt the need to assert control in the way he did, and why outside opinions affected him that much. That part mattered more than the apologies because it showed he was actually doing something instead of just saying what he thought I wanted to hear. During that time, I also heard from his brother. He came over one afternoon not unannounced, but it still caught me off guard. He apologized for what he said at dinner. He didn't try to turn it into a joke or brush it off. He admitted that he escalated the situation instead of diffusing it, and that even if he thought he was defending me, the way he did it made things worse. It didn't erase what happened, but it did make it easier to not carry that part of the situation forward. After a few weeks of space, I agreed to meet my husband. It wasn't planned as a big moment, just a conversation to see where things stood. He didn't come in defensive. He didn't try to justify anything. He explained what he had been working through in therapy and how he let external opinions shape his behavior in a way that didn't reflect who he actually is. He admitted that instead of communicating his insecurities, he turned them into control and disrespect. That conversation didn't fix everything, but it changed how I saw the situation. It stopped feeling like a sudden personality shift and started making sense as something that built up over time and was handled in the worst possible way. I could see that he was affected by it not just because of the consequences, but because he actually understood what he did. I made the decision to give him another chance, but not without conditions. Therapy wasn't optional. It had to continue, not just individually, but as a couple as well. I wasn't interested in going back to how things were without making sure the same pattern wouldn't repeat itself. He agreed to that without hesitation. Since then, we've been working through things slowly. It hasn't been perfect, but it has been consistent. He's been more open about what he's thinking and feeling instead of letting it build up. The dynamic between us feels closer to what it used to be before all of this started, but with more awareness of where things can go wrong if we stop communicating properly. Both families have been supportive in their own ways. His parents have checked in without overstepping, and mine have eased up now that they see there's actual effort being made. There's still some tension, but it's not as heavy as it was in the beginning. Something else that came out of all this is that he and his brother are back on good terms. They talked things through and cleared the air. It doesn't mean everything is forgotten, but they're not carrying that argument forward. Right now, things are stable. Not in a way that ignores what happened, but in a way that shows progress. We're continuing therapy, still working on communication, and not rushing to pretend everything is perfect. There's also a family trip coming up. His parents planned a week-long trip to Turkey for everyone, including my parents. It's meant to be a break from everything that's happened and a chance to spend time together without tension hanging over every interaction. I'm cautiously looking forward to it. It feels like a step toward normal, but I'm not treating it like a reset button. That's where things stand now. It's not a perfect ending, but it's not the chaos it was either. I'm in a better place mentally. The relationship is being worked on instead of ignored, and the people involved have taken accountability where it mattered. Update 3. I didn't think I would be back here again, especially not with something like this. But things have taken another turn, and it feels incomplete not to share it. A lot of people followed along from the beginning, and even when I stepped away for a while, the advice and perspective I got here stayed with me. I've been trying to handle everything in real life first instead of running here immediately, but after what came out recently, it feels like this is the only way to explain it properly from start to where things are now. In my last update, I had said that I decided to give my husband another chance. That decision wasn't rushed. It came after weeks of distance therapy and actually seeing effort instead of just hearing apologies. He committed to individual therapy, we started couple sessions, and for a while it genuinely felt like we were rebuilding something stable. The version of him I fell in love with started to show again. He was calmer, more present, and a lot more honest about things he would usually keep to himself. We didn't just stay stuck in recovery mode either. His parents planned a week-long family trip to Turkey, and both sides of the family went. I was hesitant at first because putting everyone together after everything that had happened didn't seem like the safest idea, but it turned out better than expected. It wasn't perfect, but there were no explosions, no passive-aggressive comments, no tension hanging over every interaction. For the first time in a long time, it felt like things were moving forward instead of constantly circling the same issue. Coming back from that trip, things stayed steady. Therapy continued, conversations became easier, and there was less of that underlying tension that had been there before. It wasn't like everything was magically fixed, but it felt manageable. That mattered more than anything. Then a few days ago, everything shifted again. There was a farewell party for my husband's brother since he's moving to Australia. It wasn't a small gathering either. Family, friends, a mix of people who had been around us for years. The atmosphere was relaxed, almost like a reset point after everything that had happened over the past months. People were laughing, catching up, talking about his move, making plans to visit. It felt normal. By the time the night started winding down, most people had gone to bed or left. I stayed up in the living room, watching a series, just trying to decompress after being around so many people. His brother came and sat down next to me. It didn't feel strange in the moment because that kind of casual interaction had always been normal before everything got complicated. The conversation started off simple. He asked how things were going, how therapy had been, whether things between me and my husband were actually improving. It wasn't invasive, just general conversation. Then it shifted into talking about university days, the kind of things we used to do back then, how different life feels now compared to that time. At some point, he mentioned that he had always been surprised when I started dating his brother. Not in a dramatic way, more like a reflection of how things looked from his perspective back then. He said he never really thought I would go for someone like my husband because of how different their personalities are. He even admitted that he didn't take our relationship seriously in the beginning because of that. That part didn't really land as anything major at first. People make assumptions all the time. But then he said something that changed how I saw everything that came after. He told me that back when we first started dating, he had a conversation with my husband where he said he thought I was more his type. Not as a move, not as something he intended to act on, but as an observation. He said he told him he was surprised I chose him and not the other way around. He made it clear that he never crossed a line after that. He didn't pursue anything, didn't try to interfere, and stepped back completely once he saw we were serious. From his perspective, it was something that happened once and then got left in the past. The part that mattered wasn't what he said. It was when he said it happened. It wasn't recent. It wasn't during the period where everything was already falling apart. It was years ago, at the very start of my relationship with my husband, and I had never heard about it. That changed everything. I didn't react in that moment. The conversation ended there, and I went to bed. But that information sat with me in a way I couldn't ignore. It connected too many dots that didn't make sense before. When I brought it up to my husband, he didn't deny it. He didn't try to minimize it either. He admitted that the conversation happened exactly as his brother described. He told me that when it happened, it affected him more than he let on. At the time, he brushed it off externally, but internally it stayed with him. It planted something that didn't go away. Instead of addressing it, he buried it. He explained that it made him feel like he was competing in a way he hadn't been before. Not openly, not in a way anyone else could see, but internally. It made him question why I chose him, whether I would eventually realize I made the wrong choice, whether I would compare them in ways he couldn't control. Instead of talking to me about it, he kept it to himself. He didn't want to bring it up because he thought it would create doubt where there wasn't any. He didn't want to risk putting that idea in my head, so he decided to carry it alone. That decision is what turned everything into what it became. He said that over time, small things started feeding into that insecurity. Moments that meant nothing to me became something else in his head. If I laughed at his brother's jokes, if we all spent time together, if there was any comparison at all, it reinforced something he never actually checked with me. By the time his friends started making comments about dominance and control, that insecurity already existed. It didn't create the problem. It just gave him a direction to act on it. Instead of dealing with the fear, he tried to overcompensate for it. That's where the behavior came from. The comments, the need to assert control, the way he started framing our relationship. It wasn't random. It wasn't sudden. It was built on something that had been sitting there for years without being addressed. Hearing that didn't make me angry in the way I expected. It wasn't rage or even frustration in the usual sense. It felt like something had shifted underneath everything I thought I understood. All of the things we had already worked through suddenly had another layer behind them. The situation wasn't just about outside influence or bad judgment. It started with something he never told me, something that shaped how he saw our relationship from the beginning. What made it harder to process is that I never questioned my choice. Not once. There was never a moment where I felt like I picked the wrong person. The differences between them were exactly why I chose my husband. I didn't want someone unpredictable or constantly chasing something new. I wanted stability, and that's what I saw in him. He never gave me the chance to say that at the time it would have mattered most. We're still together. That hasn't changed. Therapy is still ongoing, and this is now part of what we're working through. It's not something that can be resolved quickly because it affects how trust is built, not just in terms of actions, but in terms of openness. His brother leaving for Australia happened the day after that conversation. In a way, it created distance that might be necessary for now. There's no ongoing tension between them anymore, but there's also space for things to settle without constant proximity. Where things stand now is complicated, but not unstable. There's effort, there's honesty, and there's a willingness to address things that were ignored before. At the same time, there's a level of awareness now that wasn't there before, and that changes how everything is approached moving forward. I'm not looking at this as a clean ending or a perfect resolution. It's more like understanding the full picture for the first time, even if that picture is more complicated than I expected. That's the update. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Daily Tales Update.